What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Star everyone here bringing another video. Today is a pretty awesome episode for Uchuu Sentai Kyuranger, and I wanted to do a review for it. For the episode, it finally moved the story forward. It introduced a new combination for the season, which is one of the most important ones that will be pretty consistent probably for a good while until the fourth mecha comes into the show, probably the next 10 episodes or so. But yeah, this episode is called I'll Become a Fighting Shield, and it obviously is referring to, about how they have to protect Tsurugi, Ho-Ho Soldier. So what ends up happening is that the episode starts off with the Kyurangers being given their Kyuranger licenses by Kotaro, who he actually made them. Thing is, they even mentioned maybe we should make one for Tsurugi, but the thing is that Lucky obviously has not such a positive outtake on him, and he's not so keen on just doing that for him. So then we end up seeing Tsurugi actually having a nightmare kind of dream sequence where he remembers an incident when he was trying to fight against Don Armage, and he ends up and where he ended up sacrificing, his friend ended up sacrificing his life, Kiervo, who was someone from another, constellation system, during the big battle that led to Don Armage's supposed death. So then what happens is that when he sees Kiervo get destroyed, he wakes up, and Tsurugi ends up talking to Spada and Raptor, who obviously had been with him for several episodes. What ends up happening is that he ends up telling them to go and search for a way to learn about what actually happened to Don Armage and why is he still alive, because that's obviously the big goal here. Why is Don Armage alive if he's supposed to be dead, because Tsurugi was supposed to have killed him? So what happens is that they go on their own mission, and then we end up having an attack occur, which leads to them finding out that there is a Vice Shogun attacking. And what ends up happening is that Lucky, Hammy, Naga, Balance, Champ, Stinger, Kotaro, and I believe that's it. I'm not 100% sure, but it's almost, 8 of the Kyurangers go down. Is it 8? No, it's 7. It's 8. Yeah, it's 8 of the Kyurangers go down to Earth to fight. If you include, yeah, that's right. 8 of them go down to fight, and what ends up happening is is it 8? It's something like that. But most of them go down to fight, and what ends up happening is they end up meeting Tetsu and Gabler. Gabler is another kind of Malstrate kind of monster that isn't one of the ones that looks like the same thing that we always see. It's one of the ones that actually has a unique design and he has his own abilities. So Gabler actually ends up grabbing in Hammy, Naga, Balance, Garu, Champ, Stinger, and Kotaro inside of him, and he ends up using his kind of tentacles or whatever to leech onto them and suck them dry from within himself, so that they end up draining all their power and become weak and potentially just die. So what ends up happening is that they're captured, and then that leads to Tsurugi and Lucky being the only ones that are left fighting against Tetsu and Gabler. At first, they actually are battling, but at one point or another, Don Armage shows up, and he ends up talking to Tetsu, and Gabler basically says, "You don't have to deal with Tsurugi now. You can fight him at any time. He's not immortal anymore." So it's not something that's dire for them to fight, because they can destroy him at any point. At least that's what they assume. So at that point, they end up leaving, but Don Armage ends up speaking to Tsurugi and mentioning how, and saying, "You may have thought that you had destroyed me, but you gave up all your friends, all those people just for you to use your power or whatever." And so then what ends up happening is that we learn about who Tsurugi really is and what his past is. we end up learning that Tsurugi actually gave up the 88 warriors or whatever from the different constellation planets, and what ended up happening was he ended up giving up his immortality for sheer power from those warriors, which unfortunately obviously didn't lead to Donamage dying, even though that was what was assumed to have happened. So, he obviously is not someone that's so keen on being united. And just to understand, Sho is still on the base, and what ends up happening is that at first, Sho is like, we need to work together, and he's talking about Tsurugi and Lucky, and the thing is that Lucky's not so keen on it, and Tsurugi wants to do things on his own, and we learned that, he felt bad because he had this friend named Kirvo, who ended up being someone he got really close to, but ended up, when he was about to be taken out by Donamage, Kirvo acted as his shield and lost his life in battle, and that really upset Tsurugi, and that led to him having a heavy burden on his heart, where he knew that he had sacrificed some of the closest people in his life for just to keep him alive, and it's an unfortunate fate. That he had this immortality, and he ended up losing all of that strength and everything. So what ends up happening is that eventually Lucky does end up learning to understand him, and at the same time Lucky says, like, I'll act like you're fighting Shield, as the title comes across. He'll fight with you, and he'll also protect you. So he's not someone that's going to just sit there and be on the side and protect you, but he will fight you. But at the same time, Tsurugi's big point is that he doesn't want anyone to die. He's very much so, he cares more about making sure that no one ends up perishing, and that's why he didn't want people to fight with him in the first place, because he felt like he would lose someone in the line of battle, because he had already lost so many during the battle against Donamage in the past. So what ends up happening is that eventually, like, he does end up gaining that trust and understanding between the two of them, and they do end up fighting Gabler and Tetsu. Eventually, what ends up happening is that the two of them do some awesome attacks together, and they do end up taking out, they do end up beating up Gabler, which then releases the Kyurangers. What ends up happening is that following that, Ho-Ho Soldier and Lucky end up summoning their individual Voyagers, Ho-Ho Voyager and Shishi Voyager, to go and attack Gabler, who turns big. And eventually what ends up happening is that Tetsu also is turned big. But then following this, suddenly the others want to help out, because the two of them don't have enough strength to really beat those two, because one's a Vice Shogun and one's a pretty powerful Mao Street. So what ends up happening is that suddenly when they're about to use their Kyutama, it ends up glowing, and suddenly all the Kyutama make a ring around the two Voyagers, and suddenly Tsurugi ends up using his sword and shield, and suddenly makes it so that they can combine the powers of the 12 Kyutama, which leads to them forming Kyutamajin, which is the combination that involves all 12 Kyutama together. So that ends up happening, and that leads to that formation taking shape, and we end up seeing Kyutamajin go up against Gabler and Tetsu. What ends up happening though is that eventually when they're about to do Meteor Booster, which is like the final attack for Kyutamajin, which is a combination of all the 12 mechas, Voyagers or whatever, suddenly Tetsu uses Gabler as a shield, just to use him as kind of like a sacrifice so that Tetsu doesn't get destroyed. So at that point what ends up happening is that Tsurugi even says, like, how dare, what a terrible thing to use your own ally as a shield. And he's like, well, you just and like Lucky kind of makes a retort at him, like, well, that's what you kind of did to me in a way. And it's kind of funny, but it makes sense. And anyway, those two end up using Kyutamajin and destroying Gabler, and Tetsu ends up disappearing. So then we end up seeing the Kyurangers back on the Orion ship, where Tsurugi is given his Kyuranger license, and Tsurugi says, "Just call me Tsurugi from now on. I know I might be older than you guys, but I think we can get along and we'll work this out," or whatever. And so they finally do get to become a team. So obviously the next question is that Kotaro ends up asking is, I want to give, Raptor and Spada their licenses. And they end up asking, but where are they? And so what ends up happening is that Tsurugi ends up explaining that they end up going to the, the Hologorium system, which is another system within the constellation, within the universe, where they hope to get the Hologorium Kyotama to time travel to the past to find out why Don Armage is still alive. So what ends up happening is that the Spada and Raptor do end up reporting about the location of the Kyotama and all that stuff, and the episode basically ends with them, with the Q Rangers using the Orion to travel to the Hologorium system to help Raptor and Spada find out where the Hologorium Kyotama is and use it to travel back in time. Now, as far as what the episode teaser for episode 25 looks like, it does look like we're going to see Kotaro's mother appear, and also all 12 Q Rangers will be fighting in it, which will be very cool. As far as things go, I don't know too much else. There's Tetsu, I believe, is supposed to return, and we'll see some other stuff happen, of course, but as a whole, I really did enjoy this episode. I know this was a little bit of a shorter review, and that's also because it's a pretty straightforward episode, new formation, and finally Ho-Ho Soldier being considered a Q Ranger. Fairly typical situation where, like, the Q Rangers at first are not seeing eye to eye, and then eventually, or the Rangers in general are not seeing eye to eye, and then eventually what ends up happening is that the Special Ranger becomes part of the team. Definitely has happened a number of times where they first work separate and then they work together. But so that's what happens in this episode, and it should be interesting to see how things will progress. And eventually when the fourth mecha is introduced and when we see more about Don Armage, I'm looking forward to that. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, tell me what you guys think. Did you guys enjoy this episode? What are your guys' thoughts on this episode? And what are your guys' hopes and thoughts for the future of the show, whether it be the next episode or things that you hope to see later on in the show? Leave your comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next videos. Until then, guys, I'm Crazy Sarah 1, and goodbye, guys.